Okay, so if you are watching this recording later in the future on our YouTube channel, want to say first, thanks for watching this video, but second, this is an unusual meetup that we're having here. We've got a shared collaborative whiteboard that, in addition to the graffiti, we're going to take a little bit of time to draw out our own versions of CI/CD pipelines. So for the next several minutes, you're basically going to see a still screen and not a lot of activity. Feel free to jump forward a few minutes into the future of this video to get to the good stuff with the discussions and the material. With that announcement out of the way, looking at the room, feel free to grab yourself some scratch space and draw out what your pipeline looks like, and we'll start talking about it in just a few minutes. I'll set a little timer here for 3 to 5 minutes, and I'll check back in after a little bit.
Anybody skipping ahead might miss the color commentary, though.
Now that's a risk that they take. The fun thing is, whoever's watching the video has to see just my screen. So I'm gonna go ahead.
Where's Stephanie's cursor? I want to go play around in her space.
I don't know. That's the wonder and the horror of
Hey,
this setup.
hey, stay away from my space.
Hey, sorry. What was is there a way to like pan the canvas
Yes.
over?
Yes. Hold the space bar and then click and drag.
Spacebar. Thank you.
Uh-huh.
All right, I put my small example out there for what I consider like what GetPops is.
Sweet.
Well, I can't figure out how to use it, so I'll just put mine in the chat. I'm not having success at all.
So
I'm not finding a space. I'm not able to click
Let's
anything
see.
that makes a mark on the screen.
Are
I am
you
failing
on,
this test. I failed.
Are you doing this just in a regular browser on a regular PC kit?
No, I'm on a Mac.
I mean, that should be fine. You're in a browser?
Yes.
Okay. If you just like double click anywhere on this double click anywhere, does a little cursor pop up? It should let you start typing text.
Okay, let me go back. The web page reloaded because there was a problem. No. Show grid. No. I don't know why.
Let's see.
Copy to clipboard. Stats forms. I don't know what this is.
Let's try something dangerous here.
Yeah, I couldn't get it done on a PC. It's not responding when I try to double click for text.
Say that one more time. Sounded important.
I was just saying that I had the same experience on a PC from a Firefox browser. Double clicking doesn't allow me to enter text.
Nothing. Does like if you just do a simple test like a click and drag, does it create like the usual little rectangle that you would expect like this?
Yeah, I can draw a box,
What?
but I can't put anything in it.
One, two, three, four, five, six, 7, 8. That's odd. Let's see. Oh, too far, too far.
How do you surround stuff? I made a mess in the upper right-hand corner, just so you know.
Wait, say again, Peter?
Yeah, GetOps. It's
Oh.
a small thing. I put it as it's very small, but these are my thoughts.
Okay.
There's principles for GetOps, and this is a thought that I had for using when you think about compiling your stuff, because most of the stuff that's running now in the cloud, you don't compile. Like Java, you compile it. Go, you compile it. C++, you compile it. But now other code doesn't compile. And now you have to think about what's going inside of the cloud. And there's different thoughts about this. What is the truth inside of Kubernetes? What's the truth of it? Really, think about the problems.
Is that an existential question?
Yes, because people don't know what inside of the cloud is. Most of the managers don't know what is inside of their Kubernetes systems. They don't know what's running it.
I'm not sure I'm following. So if sort of the core of what we're talking about right now is like CI/CD, right? Really the concentration at that point is on the code, right? Like what you're actually developing as an application. So you started to say something about compiled code versus not. But then it sounds like you're shifting onto platforms now. So,
GitHub.
to a developer, who really cares, right? Like a developer doesn't
Yeah.
care where their stuff is running. They
And the
just want
managers
their
don't
code to
care.
run.
Yeah, but think about the dev people. They put their codes inside of GitHub, okay? If you tell them to put everything on GitHub, private GitHubs, it's there. Therefore, you could put everything inside of GitHub. And therefore, that's the truth. That's you're delivering inside of your cloud. And therefore, there is credentials about this. There is understand by GitHub.
I think I'm missing your point. So the other gentleman speaking, I think to his point, and I agree.
That's fine.
That-
Don't worry about it. Don't worry about it. But that's my point. That's all I say. I'm go back to your stuff. That's my thoughts right now.
Yeah, it's sort of a like just how we I mean like we're starting off the conversation and we're going to cover a bunch of CI/CD stuff, but since we're talking about CI/CD pipelines and talking about sources of truth, like this is more, I think this would actually make a good separate conversation, is having this discussion of everything being elevated into basically its own software repository. So like in this situation, right, if we're doubling down and getting for real about GitOps and talking about codifying what, say, a Kubernetes cluster looks like.
Mhm. I'm sorry. Don't worry about it.
Well,
Don't worry about
it's actually a good point though, right? Because now it basically turns your entire your platform itself turns into a software project, right?
Mhm.
I think
I
this would
agree.
be a really good topic to get into. These are good points.
Thank you.
That said, let's see. It's been some time. Is there anybody who would like to? Do we need a few more minutes? Do we have anyone who'd like to jump in and start talking about what they've got going on?
I'm just about done. Just drawing out some random lines if you want me to start, Drew.
Okay, I'll give it another. You tell us when you're ready. If you just need like another 30, 60
I'm
seconds.
done. I just finished the lines. I'm good.
Okay. You're gonna have to. You're gonna have to help me find you. I'm not really sure.
I'm down deep. If the Lambda and the South Park reference, you'll find me.
Here we go. Okay.
So crude, but we'll start at the top left if you guys can see my dancing cursor. So a couple things that we do, and so just for context, we work in a unclassed development environment for a high side customer cleared customer space, government customer. So we will create code bases and feature sets and then eventually migrate them up to the customer space. To do that, and what we found effective for us specifically is every single dev has an individual local development workspace that mirrors the entire environment locally installed in their environment. I'm particularly enamored with this because I found it very effective for teams to actually be able to develop independent of each other without squashing each other's environments or databases or values or of some sort. So we go from there. They'll issue feature branches across the board for each of those individual tasks and stories they're working against. We'll have devs floating around, senior devs that will actually merge those features into what will develop into an eventual delivery. But from feature branches, it moves into a linting process. And I've been turned on to linting from a stylistic quality assurance perspective, especially if you have a lot of junior devs in your environment. Linting really helps them, the juniors, keep from making stupid mistakes and helps all the code look consistent with form and function. But from a greening the field and enabling developers to execute and saving some of the seniors' time, linting automates a lot of that cleanup work, or at least flags like known bad patterns so the junior devs can go back and sort of fix things. So I'm a big fan of linting from that perspective, let alone just stylistically. Then we move into automated testing. We use Cypress. There are other tests that are available out there. Cypress just is more developer-driven automated testing. So that allows our team to write code and tests that go along with our feature branches. So then it automatically will spin up the environment, test a container version of our code base with that feature changes, and tests and does regression. It's a quick way to make sure something didn't break that wasn't intended to break. Shameless plug for our Shift product, which we use to actually send to the high side from low to make sure everything's working. We'll run it through a static code analysis tool base to make sure there's more anti-patterns that we can catch and filter. Ultimately, then we'll actually kick this off. We use the AWS code build family, code star family of tools, so code build and code deploy, to actually take all our code and wrap it in Zappa. So it's a Python code base, but because Lambda doesn't actually have a framework that's usable, it's just pure JavaScript, pure Python, for example. We wrap Python with a Django wrapper using Zappa, and then deploy that Lambda. So now again, to make it easier for our juniors to develop quicker, that's another one of our little tool tips. That releases a finished Lambda that then can now get deployed across our dev, test, and staging environments. And then, funny enough, at the end, we'll profit. But yeah, that's a quick high level of some of the things we have in our pipeline. We don't use a lot of tools. It's mostly AWS. We use the free SonarQube, for example, and we pay for Cypress because it's that useful for us. So we try to use as much as we can in-house from an AWS perspective, but there are better tools that probably we can pay for that will speed us up a little bit. But this is what we do.
Are you building a set of services or one app with a UI that your users use? Could you explain?
Yes. So actually, we're building multiple Lambdas that go against multiple microservices. Each one, it's one unified app with a unified front end, but each module is its separate own microservice, which is its own separate Lambda that we're running behind the scenes.
Cool. About how long did it get you guys get the team to like get to this level of maturity?
That's a good question. So it probably took us 6 months to get to this state. First, we all tried to develop in a shared environment, and then we ran into a lot of joint, competition or conflicts between the devs. So the feature branching feature or the local dev environment came out first, and then we brought in a lot of new juniors, and then Linton came online. We got tired of way too many people doing testing manually, so we brought Cypress online. We were running into low to high deployment issues, so that's where we brought our Shift feature in. We're starting to get real for production deployment stuff, so SonarQube came online. So before all this, it was just a dev environment, and then build Zappa, Lambda, and then deploy. And then we started running into issues that we had to sort of fix.
Okay. I'm kind of curious, like I see the local and individual dev workspaces going into feature branches. At what point might a feature branch be merged into the master branch, or whatever is the equivalent in this workflow?
Yeah, so it's usually at the end of a sprint. We will actually close out our sprint and make last calls for any last PRs to get pushed in. Our seniors will actually look at the PR and approve them. And once the PRs are approved, and then any collection of those PRs get all merged in. Once the merge is successful, it then fires through some unit testing and regression testing to make sure nothing broke that wasn't unexpectedly broken.
Okay.
And can you say anything about at the start you mentioned you're doing something, I guess, unclassified, but for a classified customer. Do you have any security checks or protocols that you do during the pipeline process? Do you have like a secrets manager that you have to pull secrets in from? How is that done?
Yeah, so there is a secrets manager and parameters files both on the low side and the high side for this customer. We have mock secrets that we use for the low side that get the app online, and then we just replace those secrets in the high side with the specific parameters that are unique to that customer. But yeah, other than that, then we have SonarQube that's scanning all our frameworks. It's a serverless framework, which is nice from a security surface attack area perspective. There aren't any real servers that are running, and our Lambdas get destroyed the minute they're done working on whatever particular task they're functioning on. So it's a really, if you can envision an environment, if you looked in a VPC, it would be several Lambdas firing off. And then we're even using serverless RDS. So even the serverless environment shuts down when it's not being used. So from a tech surface perspective, I love this design because it's very self-healing, self-protecting out of the gate. And then it's easier to accredit. And this is funny, I think Drew and I talked about this briefly just the other day. Serverless is very hard for assessors to understand when their tools can't scan non-existent workloads. And so making sure they understand what it means and how we're using other tools like SonarQube to examine those are we found very useful.
Thanks. Do you do any assignment of certificates, like credentials, like certificates in the microservices themselves or in the containers?
So the certificates we do internal certificates for our local environments, and then we switch out those certificates when we move them up to the customer location.
Cool. All right, thanks, Gabe. Any
Sure.
last comments or anything before we pick the next person? Cool. All right. There's some other things on here. Who wants to go up next?
Me, I want to go next, Drew.
All right. I see.
So on over to Myspace.
Can't tell if you're trying to hide or if you're trying to like.
You
Oh,
said
look at
to
this
find
all
some
fancy.
space all the way away from everything. And that's exactly what I did.
There you go.
So I'm learning something here. Like, did these images happen when you pasted in, like the Kubernetes wheels and the GitLab Fox? Like, how'd you make these?
If you go up to library at the top, which is that little book right at the top, you can click on that and you can grab the libraries. And
Okay.
I use Excalidraw a lot, so they were all kind of ready in the waiting.
Okay. You brought your own stuff. All right.
Well, somebody else built it, but I
Just
set it up. So yeah, so Myspace, for background for everybody, we work in a similar environment to what they were talking about before. The migration of code between networks isn't quite captured here, but what is captured is something that people like to argue about, and that's whether or not you should have a develop branch. And this example does. So if you guys want to fight about
fight me, bro.
The most interesting thing about what we do is we support pipelines for several different teams, and they're all using different technologies, NPM, Maven, etc. Canico, Helm, all this has been templated out, and the runners have been customized to be able to run with the specific services that we use. So what this diagram is capturing is we're using GitOps or GitLab CI/CD, and we have a few different paths. When you're doing development, you have to do testing, packaging, and you can do deployment into a development Kubernetes environment. When you do a merge request, you follow a similar pattern, but we do add in scanning, which we also use SonarQube. And then when you finally merge into your develop branch, we skip scanning and testing because it should have been done by then. And then we deploy to a Kubernetes environment for staging. Once that gets graduated into the main branch, we do a package and release, which is a little bit more controlled. It goes through a couple of other scanning tools which are not pictured here, but it does go through Argo CD, which handles our integration with Kubernetes to sort of act as a barrier just in case, we need a rollback. So it's kind of a very fast, very high level of what we do when it comes to this pipeline. And we'll say we do use GitLab's auto DevOps functions, which was a little tricky in the environment that we're in, but it works like a charm when you want to deploy directly to a Kubernetes cluster. So if you haven't looked into it, I highly recommend it.
Nice.
And that's my space.
That made it sound simple. I'll bet that's just a sign of how much work went into it.
It is tough, especially with the Docker containers and the agency sort of restrictions that we're under. But luckily, Canico exists, so it kind of got us past a lot of that stuff for containerization.
Yeah. What is
Stephanie's
it?
whole job is to make things easier for developers, right? So like all the things that she's talking about, templating all that stuff out and making it just magic. It really lessens the burden on developers.
Can you
Yeah, and there were.
can you say what the agency is?
You're gonna give her a panic attack. Don't do that.
Don't give me a panic attack.
Oh, the 3-letter one. Okay.
So how much time, like, would you say it got to this level?
For a single technology, like a Maven sort of Java workflow, probably took 3 months. The additional month was upgrading the runner to allow for Kubernetes volumes to be introduced into the actual runtime environment for the CI pipeline. So when you add in other technologies, it takes a little longer.
That's like real time elapsed though, right? Like that's not beating your brain on it day in, day out, because you get sidetracked with other stuff.
We do a lot of operational support as well, so
that's,
you get sidetracked.
Is that like in addition to lots of other things in the span of about 3 months managed to put this together, or is that like if you were to sum together the time spent?
I guess it's a tough question to answer because there were a lot of things going on.
It's been iterative too, right? Like,
sure,
you know, it starts out in baby steps and then things just sort of grow from there.
Mm-hmm.
Definitely. When we tackled auto DevOps, and you're at the edge of what GitLab's working on, so the problems that you're hitting, the entire world is hitting at the same time, and working through that's a little bit tougher than things that have been around for a while.
Oh wow. Okay. Yeah, that's interesting. That is such an elegant diagram. I can't get past that.
Thank you. I'm a
If you
big
gave her
fan
more
of
than 10
Excalibur.
minutes, if you gave her more than 10 minutes, she could do something really fancy.
I'll bet. Have you seen there's various YouTubers out there that like put together boss fight music, and they'll arrange it and they'll like give themselves 60 seconds and then give themselves like a minute or an hour, and then they'll give themselves like a day, and they'll show like what they can do with that amount of time. Have you seen that kind of stuff? There's
I feel like I need to Google that right now.
Yeah, that's I'm sidetracked. I'm not paying attention to this meeting anymore. Thank you.
That's okay. All I
That's like a
ask
great
is that
rabbit hole.
you just mute the mic while you're doing it. It's totally worth it. The like funny
So boss fight Excalibur, is that what I'm supposed to be looking?
Not Excalibur, no, but like boss fight 60 seconds music. I couldn't tell you. If I had it on hand, I'd bring it up, but I don't.
Okay.
There are also people that go to talks like at conferences and they kind of diagram them all out like on the fly.
Yeah.
Kind of like the courtroom artists, except with tech talks.
Okay, Stephanie, any last comments or thoughts before there we go. This is the good one, the Spider-Man one.
Oh yes, okay, I know what you're talking about. I left it 12 seconds.
For me, those all look the same.
Where did you find that thing?
It's circulated around on the internet.
Yeah, the internet's a wonderful thing. I don't have any other things to say, Drew.
Okay. Cool. Thank you, Stephanie. I'm lazy and Nick's space is here, so Nick is up next.
Well, I'm not as smart about all this stuff as Stephanie is, or probably a lot of the other people on. But I have like some general things that popped into my head, and I just sort of like listed things out. For me personally, you have a lot of people that say CI CD in the same sentence a lot, or maybe smashed together with a / in my head, I like to sort of separate the concepts out because I think it was Peter that brought it up earlier, right? Like GetOps, you tend to sort of have some scenarios in which it's a pull approach, as opposed to something that's occurring at the same time necessarily as your CI, right? So like you could separate those concepts and talk about them separately. So I just like listed out some general things that were in my head, right? Like generally you want to make sure that you're testing your code, running your unit test integration, like linting, as others have said. All those things that make sure that your code's nice and pretty and that like basic functionality works. And then scanning tools for sure need to be in there. Things that are going to check to make sure that you aren't like having weird open source licenses pulled into your projects, right? Like, there have been a lot of companies that have gotten into trouble where, technically they're using a library that has a license that means they should be open sourcing their entire proprietary code base, which they don't want to do. So, things like that are important to check early on to make sure that you're not doing things that you shouldn't do. Certainly like general code cleanliness and security and things like that. Like anything you can build into your pipeline that's going to make your life easier and make your code more secure, like definitely do that. And then the rest of it is really, are you building the code, right? Like, is it compiling versus, do you have some sort of, Python or other language that doesn't necessarily need to be compiled? And then creating any artifacts as part of that process. So, publishing stuff into Maven, or hey, we're rolling container images as part of this and bundling up our software that way into repositories that you can pull down, whatever it is that you're developing somewhere external to this pipeline even. And then as far as continuous deployment, you have your dynamic analysis, and I already mentioned GitOps. That's one thing that I'm kind of a fan of when you can make it happen, is kind of that pull model, because then you don't necessarily have to have your like your Kubernetes deployment secrets inside of your CI/CD, right? Like if you have the ability in your GitOps software, like an Argo CD or CAP or something like that, to hit your Git repository and pull down your infrastructure as code artifacts or something like that. That to me is a lot better model than saying like, hey, I'm giving this service account access to do stuff inside of my cluster. Like that's much scarier endeavor for me. So just like some general thoughts there, I guess.
I like it.
That was good. Thank you.
And I mean this in the most positive way. It's a good sort of academic look at the problem instead of like specific tactical approaches. It's more of, let's just think about what it is we need to accomplish here. That's cool. Nick, any last thoughts or comments before we hand it over to someone else?
Love you.
All right, so who's up next?
So here's an existential question back to some of the earlier topics. When do we decide that what we've built needs to be completely refactored or rechanged due to either changes in stacks or changes in design patterns? Have you guys run into instances where you're like, oh, this was great for a year, but now I have to scrap it and redo it in parallel or in flight? More curiosity question than anything I've experienced.
I think there's always going to be scenarios where you have to pivot, right? And I don't know that I've never necessarily ever encountered something that was like so far gone that you had to scrap it entirely. But I would say don't be afraid to do that. Don't be so invested in whatever you've built to say that you couldn't do it better by entirely rethinking the problem. Right. That's how we get stuck in these badge situations, right? Like not being willing to just pull the plug and say, no, we need to get out of here.
Yeah, no, well said.
Yeah, I actually feel it's kind of like the Ship of Theseus, right? That quintessential puzzle. Like consider the ship of Theseus, this boat back in back in BC times. Consider a large wooden ship that is slowly repaired one plank at a time. After a sufficient amount of time has passed, every plank has been replaced, and now is the philosophical question, is that still the original ship? I feel like it's kind of the same approach here, right? Thinking like a little bit less like if you have to migrate entire systems, like if you have to re-engineer things out of Jenkins and into GitLab, for example, like that is a kind of a wholesale, complete rebuilding, restructuring. But otherwise, I feel like it's just trying to keep up with it.
But think about your goals, honestly. It starts with your goals. What are your goals for dev, test, UAT, and production? They're different streams. Really? Does everybody agree with that? Different gates to go from dev to test to UAT to production. And therefore there's different streams and there's different code, different SSLs, different passwords. Where do they all live? Think about it.
Yes.
You have to figure out your goals first before you start on this journey.
I think that's a good way to approach the iterative process too, is find the ones that are the intersection of least effort and biggest impact.
Greenfield helps. Greenfield helps to figure out this stuff first.
Yeah. Let's see. So I've picking someone at random. I don't know who made this awesome diagram, but if you're looking at the screen, feel free to jump in and talk at it.
Hey, Drew, it's Chris, one of your
hey, Chris,
fellow team members. But I just put this together. This is
cool.
Yeah. So I mean, this is really what I'm looking at, and really have as I'm looking at like from a disconnected environment type of scenario, looking at piecing this together and saying like, okay, so if I have a developer that's going to push code and kind of in line with what everybody's saying, so I'm pushing it to GitLab, and then from there, what I don't mention is the build service that I'm using, which is Cloud Native Build Packs, and it's compiling your libraries and your dependencies, and then it sends it back over to Git, and it's checking for any changes, right? So then what I have is that security pipeline where then, so now kind of jumping ahead here, where I do the continuous integration testing, and then going through the Sonar Cube where I'm looking for that code quality, that static code analysis, and then again, that the build service, cloud native build packs, kind of testing everything out and then going from there. And then it's going to push that image into my container registry. Yeah, thanks for that arrow right there. Yeah, where I'm going to push that into the container registry, and then I'm going to run that through a container vulnerability scanning. I'm going to push that through Trivy. And this is really kind of where I say you're going to deploy the application on any Kubernetes, right? And then you're going to have the app that's pushed, contrast agent. Then it's going to report the vulnerabilities in real time, right? In contrast, and then your security team is obviously going to check for the security and the deployment artifacts. So that's kind of where I'm at. Again, new to the CI/CD journey, and this is like in a perfect world, and this is what I'm really trying to shoot for just in my testing environment right now.
Okay.
So I love any type of feedback or
Automation, automation, automation. That's all I can say. And what your goals are for each stream. You're at test right now. When you look at dev, therefore, is your automation in line the way you want to go forward with UAT? Let's say that. Is it in line? Therefore, you will go fast to UAT and then to production. Is it correct? Is it all tested? All the tests pass, or something fails? Did the client say no to one of these tests? These are the thoughts that have to be in your mind when you're putting these systems together.
Good goals.
Because the single thing that like the client says no to should have been automated before you go forward with it.
Chris, it seems like you have a lot more attention to security. I'm just looking at the diagram. You've got the security pipeline, and then you have the security team off to the right, and security and deployment artifacts. And can you explain the security pipeline again, or in a little more detail?
yeah, just again, kind of having a compliance, right? And you brought up some good points of making sure that the client that meets the criteria. So I figured if you're baking in security along the process, if you can, how do I put this? If you can show that that you're taking security at the forefront of your pipeline, will that, I guess.
It's if I can jump in, Chris, it sounds like what we've seen historically is that a lot of people are so focused on learning the appropriate tech and getting it to just work that we feel that success is the thing just works. And so we ship it and we push it out. But depending on your ecosystem, like depending on the customer set, depending on like your client, if you're delivering software for someone, they may have less or sometimes more stringent security requirements. And there are a number of places around here that if you don't get security right, you don't even get to play ball. Like you are dead if you can't check off all the security marks. So like in the usual trap that we get caught into is just making it work, and then we present our work to security, and we're like, okay, security, can you scan this and we can go? And security's like, whoa, I've never seen any of this ever before. You got to go to the back of the line. I'm going to get to you in 6 months. And that's how projects die. So like what Chris is doing here with this that really has an emphasis on security is the product of, instead of build it and then go to security, like before you even start building it, bring security into your conversations and say, hey, we're talking about using GitLab for storing our code. Like, is everybody else doing that? Is there going to be any issues with that? Or for example, we're using SonarQube to run our scans. Like, is that an acceptable tool? Are you okay with that output? And talking about like using build packs to create our container images. Like, do you know, well, hey, security, do you know what build packs are? Like, do you know how they work? Do you know that they've recently gotten the a security assessment done by the CNCF and that the CNCF has endorsed them? Did you know that? And like, when you have those conversations now, like by the time you get all the way over to like, you know, whatever done looks like over there, like security can recite your pipeline for you. So they turn from a blocker into an advocate. Sorry if that was kind of putting words in your mouth there, Chris, but I feel like that's kind of the intention of this sort of approach here with the security heavy. It works really well for risk averse clients.
No, Drew, you did a beautiful job. That's exactly what I meant. So.
Oh, go on. Thanks.
Here's hard Jake.
Oh, feel the love.
No, that was good. Thanks, Chris.
Thanks, Drew.
I see Phil is playing by the rules. Phil, are you up next?
Sure.
All
Assuming
right.
I'm the only Phil.
Let's see. Where have we not been? So where are we, Phil? Are you underneath that snail meme poster?
I think so.
Okay.
Mostly text. Not an art major, sorry, gang.
That is okay.
So I guess to introduce myself, I'm a developer on a very small team. Most of my work is developing app for Splunk, data analysis tool. The apps consist of XML and JavaScript dashboards. They consist of custom Python code. I'll talk a little about kind of one or two of the things that I think are maybe unique for us and maybe for other people who are doing developing Splunk apps. One of them is we use a vendor tool, a build tool that takes a configuration, a JSON configuration and kind of gives us a lot of the scaffolding of what makes a Splunk app work. Things like standard configuration page layout and stuff like that. But the output of that tool interjects a lot of JavaScript that the only way that we found that we're able to scan and report on those dependencies is to manually make the dependency file, which we can then scan and report, and then we can tell the customer, hey, we built this app and here's the dependencies that we're responsible for, and here's the stuff that we're getting from the Splunk build tool, which they like because they're installing other apps that use the same tool and they have no idea what's in it. So that's been really great for us. The other thing is, so since we're such a small team, a lot of our like software requirements, gathering, and those sorts of requirements analysis activities, our team, kind of in an effort to be lean, we just document that stuff in a JSON file, and then we have like it's actually part of the unit test where it just says like, hey, did somebody answer this question in the the requirements file, and that serves as our attestation that we fulfilled whatever requirements in the software development plan or whatever. So we were kind of really happy about not having to spin up 5 or 10 or whatever Word documents for every single little project we do. So that's most of it. They have I'm really new to the CI world. Spent maybe 3 to 6 months setting this up, and it's not 100% set up, but like someone said earlier, just focusing on what was the biggest use bang for my time kind of led me to what we have today.
Nice. How long would you say it took to get something that was like reliable like this?
Yeah, so probably a good couple months. And actually, before I started on, before we had any CI, I was actually doing this all with Bash scripts on my local laptop.
Well,
And the reason for that was we separate out kind of like the core functionality of the app versus like the specific configuration for our customer to make it easier to do software reuse sharing within the agency. And because of that, like our build process was already fairly complex. So I had done a lot of that work up front. And then moving it onto GitLab made the artifact, stashing the artifacts so that auditors can come back, and also giving you the visual of what's going on. Just really, it was probably like 3 to 4 months to bash script it reliably, kind of off and on, working on it, and then a good kind of maybe 2 to 3 months to get something minimal, and then another month or two of refinement after I moved to GitLab.
And
Okay.
I'm curious, the vendor best practices and security checks, are those manual checks you're doing, or is there some additional automation that you're doing with those?
Yeah, so the vendor has like a best practice check tool.
Gotcha.
And we use that. The security checks, we started with the auto Devops, and we had to customize some of the jobs because of kind of like the anatomy of a Splunk app, some of the jobs required customization.
Gotcha. Okay, awesome.
I don't know why it just didn't occur to me to have something like this for Splunk apps. Of course, it makes sense that it would happen.
Yeah, there's definitely, I don't know if they were around when I started this, but they do have now. There's definitely a couple of like Splunk talks on like how to do it and like sample repositories. I think at the time maybe it was all on like GitHub Actions, and I didn't see anything on GitLab or something like that. Who knows?
No, but it's true. Treating Splunk apps like true dev apps is, because I know a lot of security shops will use Splunk for just normal auditing, logging, and analysis kind of stuff, and then all the dashboards and everything are on that local box, and if it goes bye. It's not saved, it's not checked, it's not. No, this is good. I like this.
Yeah, and actually your comment about that, this is a kind of a side thing that I think about a lot, is like, so if I make just a standard dashboard, or I have like a standard Splunk query that I'm running that's giving me results, like how do I know that search is correct, right?
Yes.
Like how do I know? Like it's both validation and verification, right? And there's not really a lot of like first class support for those types of activities. So it's
no, there isn't.
But what I've found is where I have custom code, it's not in the CI yet, but I have Splunk has an add-on for PyTest that'll let you make it easy to spin up a Docker image with Splunk that's running, that you can kind of like run your unit tests against.
Yes.
And like
that I love.
Yeah. So that for me has caught like a ton of issues. I'm just starting looking into, they now support React JS. And I think that'll probably make some of that stuff a little bit easier.
Yeah, because then now you become a first-class citizen with all the React JS tooling out there.
Yeah, so I'm really excited to start. I just started looking at React yesterday, but I think that'll be a big win down the road.
Oh, very awesome.
Cool. Thanks, Phil. Any last parting comments before we let go of this one?
No, that's it. Thanks.
Okay, thanks for sharing.
Appreciate the
man.
feedback, everyone.
Now, I think that was all of them. We're not done yet, but I think that was all of the drawings. Is there anybody who'd had something that we did not give a chance to talk?
I don't have anything, but is this the time where you can ask questions maybe about something that one is building on their own?
Yes, in fact, Kit, I was actually gonna talk with you. I know you were saying you were having some issues. I was gonna offer to like jam some stuff out here if you wanted to put some ideas out. But if you got some questions or whichever direction you want to go, Kit,
Okay.
it's totally up to you.
Yeah, I can do that. So I'm working on I'm making a proposal. I'm trying to figure out two things. This is a Salesforce platform. They are Agile, Scrum Master. They don't have any documented process as far as their pipeline delivery models. None. So I did work up something, and it's basically developer, sandbox to, hold on, let me bring it back up.
Oh, do you have something on the whiteboard?
No, I'm just looking at my cheat sheet.
Okay.
So from the developer sandbox to their first development Salesforce space, and then they're going to push it to their feature branch, and that's going to kick off a linter, and then they do a pull request. I'm going to ask them to have 2 eyes on the pull request. I'm not sure about that. And if all of that passes, then it goes to the development branch. So we've had some discussions about this. I put the development branch. Someone else I was talking to wanted this to be the Sprint branch, but whatever. It could be a Sprint branch. And then it moves to the dev integration environment, the Salesforce dev integration environment. They don't have anything. They don't have the only, I guess Salesforce calls them orgs, but the only environments they have is right now is QA and a load environment and prod. That's it. So we're going to have a dev environment. And in between, I was thinking in between the dev environment and going to QA, which you have all manual QA testers, which is really exciting because it's like, what can I do with that? No, hardly any automated testing at all. So I was thinking to put SonarQube right there, some type of security analysis tool right in between from dev integration to QA, but I might put it right before. But anyway, my question is this. So then it goes from QA, once it's tested, it goes to another branch. It could be development, it could be Sprint. I mean, based on the feedback I'm getting, I might just get rid of the development branch. It's not a problem. It's not popular.
The single thought of here is SonarQube should be available to everybody. Everybody, dev, test, developer, production, everybody gets SonarQube.
PMs, Scrum Masters.
But where should it be in the pipeline? Should it be earlier in the pipeline, left? Like, how they say moving left?
Every part of the pipeline. Every
Well, I think
time you move,
it makes more
every
sense
time you
to
move
have
between each of the pipelines, you should run SonarQube.
But the first location will be before those PRs get approved. Like if SonarQube is failing those PRs, I don't want them, our devs to approve.
Unless you have
Absolutely.
a bill of
It shouldn't get worse
materials,
than it
unless
gets
you have a
failing
bill of
on
materials
PR.
that have been certified for every step of the way, then therefore SonarQube should run And lint should run also with SonarQube at every step between dev, QA, and prod.
Okay. So
Do you have a
then,
bill, do you have a bill of materials?
huh?
Well,
Do you have
so a
bill
lot of
materials?
programs don't need bill of chain of custody kind of pieces though. So
Yeah, so this is in Salesforce. This is more like it doesn't require a build. It's more like a
I
Python.
know, but what's in your code? What's in your code? Do you have a list of what's in your code? That's all it is. Bill of materials is what's in your code. Each version,
Mm-hmm.
every change of a version, every class that changes, you have to have a bill of materials or a list of what's in your code between each dev, QA, and prod. If you do not have those things, therefore you have to write or you have to run every test totally
Well-
every step of the way.
so
Well,
just
that's going to make it
li-
long. That would take a long time. I'm trying to
I
make
know.
it.
Well, to
1
level
hour,
set
24
though,
hours it took for us to do it with another client. It took
Well,
24
no, the
hours.
build can't
Well,
take, if you're going, a
you can't
developer
take
going
24
from,
hours. Yeah.
from your sandbox to QA, it can't take 24 hours.
So just to level set, once SonarQube has evaluated code and has pushed it into a branch, that branch could get deployed and it's not changing until you push another PR through. So doing multiple SonarQubes is like slamming your head against the wall multiple times and hoping it changes. You don't necessarily need to run it that many times. There may be a sanity check later on, but
Smaller pieces are better. Microservices are better. Smaller code is better. Test smaller code.
So looking
No,
at
I agree,
this
but-
flow here, so like I've been trying to capture Kit's thoughts here on the screen, and like what we had SonarQube like later in the line, we've kind of shifted that left to kind of happen with like linting and SonarQube like basically on every push to get that out there before it even gets ready for a PR.
That makes sense.
From
Okay.
there, we're talking about like merging, then like get a PR and put it into the dev branch, and like we'll put the moans to the side for now. We can iterate on this, but
Yeah,
where it stands
right.
today, once it's successfully merged into the dev branch, it's then introduced into the integration environment. So like, what's the intention of the integration environment, or is it really just like whether that now lands on dev QA before promotion to prod?
So, okay, because I had SonarQube a little later, a little earlier, a little later to the right, a little later, I had the dev integration environment. So the thinking is that if the developers want, I mean, it's literally the first and the only integration environment other than the QA environment that they would be able to work in. But if it's not needed, I could take it out. Then it
So
would
the
be going
question-
straight
So the
from the
question for
developer.
you, Kit, what are you envisioning in this integration environment that's different than the QA or dev environment?
That's I
Well,
think that's
yeah,
what I meant
so-
to ask.
So there's no dev they're branches. So it's going from the developer's individual in Salesforce to get an individual dev environment.
Okay. Oh, I see what you're talking about. Yeah.
Yeah. And then it goes to right there, it goes through the linter and SonarQube, and then it goes to the development branch.
Yeah, so then I see what you're talking about. So I would recommend an integration environment because if you have 10 developers and they're all smashing in their code, you want to just double check that all that merging actually is successful and something else isn't broken unintentionally. And then you have all your, but then I would argue maybe that's your QA environment as well, before, because I don't know if it gets out of an integration failed, it's going to go into QA failed. If I'm understanding how you want to work this.
Well, I would hope my other process guidance is that, you break it, you fix it. And the other thing is I have to have a hard stop before it gets to the dev to QA, because QA is doing manual testing. So I can't have an automatic
So you don't have automated unit tests or automated integration tests, is what you're saying right here, right?
Right.
That's the
That would
first
be an
step.
area,
You should
yeah.
start there before Sonar
Yeah.
Q. Sonar
For
Q
improvement.
is like a lint test. That's all it is. It's a static test. And therefore you have to create your own unit tests for features. How are you testing your features? Unit tests and integration tests are absolutely needed before you leave test. Before you leave test, you will fail in production. Some automation has to be there. Something has to be there. I don't know what it is. I don't know what your right answer is for Salesforce, because really Salesforce is a Java environment. Therefore, you create classes, you compile it. Therefore, you could create unit tests. Therefore, you could mock up stuff.
Yeah.
Therefore, you could automate it.
But here's the limit. I don't have control over the testing team. And
No, this is developer. This is developer's
This is a
job.
developer's,
This is developer's job. This is the first developer's job.
Exactly. Exactly.
And I think the challenge then is, like, depending on how much leverage you have in the ecosystem kit, like, do you have the ability to say, hey, devs, this cannot succeed until y'all start writing unit tests and y'all start putting some of this on you? Like, are you able to say that, or do you have to convince some people to do that?
No, I can definitely say it. I'm making, definitely recommendations. All of this is going to be brand new. I think I spoke to a dev lead the other day to kind of go over the initial plan, and I had to explain to him what a linter is. So I think they're really.
Unit. Back to Peter's suggestion. Unit
test, please. One single unit test. Start there. One single unit test, please.
So I think they'll be pretty. So this is going to be a future state that I'm developing, and then I have to develop, like, what can we do first to improve the process. So where I get stuck, and I'm going to speak because you all know this. You cut a release when a feature freeze. You cut a release branch, and you deploy. And for me, I've always had once the feature freeze and you cut a release branch, any defects or problems, I have them done in that release branch. Okay. And then I deploy the release branch to prod, and then I go back down the pipeline if there's any
so let me just clarify just what I heard. So if there's a defect in the feature, you're going to have them fix the feature and then release?
No.
In dev
No.
first, or in
No.
QA, or in production?
So if they're after the feature freeze, once a release is cut, we said this is the scope of the release, and we create a release branch.
Yep.
The testing team is still going to have 7 days to finish their testing because they just need the time. If they find anything additional, or if the customer changes the scope, that would happen in the release branch, and that's where we had a deployable.
That's danger. That's a danger zone from a development perspective. Like, if I'll explain to what we do and why we do it. So we will cut a feature for our dev team, our QA team. If they find a defect, we actually launch a new story into the following sprint, and that new feature fix will follow into the next sprint. So what we're afraid of is making too many changes in flight after you go through so many of the processes, and a dev changes one thing to fix one bug. You either have to start all over again, or you run the risk of breaking something that you unintentionally break. So my advice, though, is very situationally based. I would be careful when you make those changes for bugs after you've cut a release. I would suggest don't cut a release until you think you're bug free. And then you can certify, okay, this is a good release, and off we move as best as possible. But if you've released it in your process and then you found a bug, that should go all the way into your dev pipeline and go through the whole agile process.
Okay.
But
okay.
A simple question that you have to talk to dev people. This is the simplest request that you can give to dev people. Do they have a test folder? And you say, my first request is to create a test folder, not the main code, but a test folder. I want a test folder for everything going between dev and QA. Because if it's empty, you have no UA, unit tests. If you have no unit tests, I'm going to point to that. I need a test folder in your code folder.
Okay, that makes sense. So
It's a
here's
very
the other-
simple request. It's the
Yeah.
first step. That's all I'm saying.
So here's the other quandary. So you guys get it. I get your feedback. I think it's really the other problem I'm having working out in my head. They and I've done some research, but when I go to seminars and I hear people, read books and take seminars about integrated environment and continuous deployment or delivery, they never talk about rollback strategies. So once, it's more complicated if it's an integrated environment and it's fast paced. And say you get to QA and you're 5 days or 7 days into the sprint, and then a customer comes back and say, no, halt, we don't want this particular feature in. So I was reading something that says for bugs or things they roll forward, meaning they send it back to the developer and have them disable the feature or something like that. But I was wondering if you guys had any best practices for an integrated environment, fast-paced environment, to decouple a feature other than a feature flag from an integrated environment. Or am I thinking about it the wrong way?
Independencies happen in code, the way they architect it. Microservices are supposed to be independent from each one of them. Therefore, they talk to different databases, okay? If they talk to the same database, there's a dependency. If there's not independent dependencies to deliver code, that's your ball that you have to figure out. You have to create independencies inside of your services. If they're not there, you have to figure out how to create it. Otherwise, the total ball that you have that you're delivering from dev, QA, and prod, you have to create all the tests, each step, every time, to understand do you have to create the same code.
I think like for a rollback strategy kit, in my mind, and I'm biased because I've lived in like platform type gigs, really your rollback strategy is a direct function of how you're getting stuff into production. If like we're talking about CI/CD, I think really thinking hard about what CD means for that part. So however it is that you're getting that final approved code over into production, like when it's time to cut a new release, you go ahead and tag that in your Git repo, and now that is whatever is the latest version, right? 1.2 or whatever makes sense to you. And now you sick your CD on that new tag. So you say the 1.2 tag, go and deploy that. And if for reasons, then you need to roll that back to 1.1, then it's just a matter of repeating that deployment process and just feeding it 1.1 instead of 1.2.
So in the middle of 1.1, and so taking that example a little bit further, just making sure I'm having it clear in my mind. The 1.2 has the entire scoped out release, and they don't want to roll. They just want to take one thing out. I would have to roll back to the previous, best known state and just take it out and deploy it all over again. Is that what you're saying?
You'd have to know the dependencies for each of the pieces that you're rolling forward, each tag.
Yeah, and that's the responsibility of that deployment process, is knowing I need to deploy this. What do I need to pull in to make that happen? And in full disclosure, I've never touched Salesforce from this perspective, so I totally have blind spots here, and I'm kind of armchair quarterback in this one. I'm just speaking from experience with where I've been.
No, I appreciate that. Yeah, no. This is my first Salesforce project, and the only reason I took it was because I wanted some experience with Salesforce. But I hoped the downside is usually when I take projects like this, it's really exciting, but you get more mature staff. I just don't have the folks who,
Right.
it's like it's nothing there. I've never started a project with absolutely nothing there. Like they don't even have they don't have any source code repository. They have nothing.
Oh, you're gonna be kidding me. Really?
Really?
Here we
Oh
go.
my God, we have to stop that right now.
They don't have any pipelines. They don't have
It's
any.
free. GitHub is free. GitHub is free.
So
They don't
here's
have
what
it. They don't use it. They have Azure, so their whole suite is Azure. So they work in ADO, but they have the tools. They just don't use them.
So here's what I'm thinking, Kit. Start small.
But listen to this, guys. You're gonna love this. I started probably 4 weeks ago. I was trying to do interviews with the architect. He, was ghost and he really didn't know much. And the product owner is like, I expected you to fix it by now. Like I expected something to happen. And I'm like, you don't even have, she's like, don't worry about what we have. Just tell me what we're going to do. And I'm like, that's not really how it works. But they expect it to be fixed very quickly. Like they expect me to do magic and woof, it's done.
I would, under that scenario, I would recommend talking through with them what an MVP looks like. Like this is a good conversation, the tip to tail conversation here. This is good, but, and I'm dropping more buzzwords, this is going to be like boiling the ocean. I think if you just want to start with something super simple and like whatever that means to them, like even if it's like, hey, take a feature branch, let's run like a test, like pick a linter, run it through a linter, the end. Now merge that into dev, put it out into some environment, and now you can at least say, I now have like the pipeline that will take source code and will put it in your environment.
Right.
You have that. Once you've done that, right? Where's my stupid little?
But the state of the code, I'm crying over here. I'm really crying over here. If you don't have the state of the code, the linter doesn't matter because the linter would have to run every time. I mean, every time you put something forward.
Yes. So
there's no tests. There's no unit tests. There's no code repository. Start there. Even before lint test, you need to know the state of your code. That is the first absolute principle before anything that I can say here right now.
Right.
Yeah. Find out what that MVP is. And even if it's like, hey, devs should use code repos, or even like, you might have to lead them by the nose on this one and show them, here's what good looks like.
Yep.
But yeah, I think like a code repo, a unit test, and then if you're able to like, now that you've got the groundwork for a pipeline, then you can say, now we can move on to like linter. Yay, okay. Then like a PR and then go through. And like when you're doing this, whatever code ultimately lands in this production environment, if at all possible, it's not always possible, should be low risk. It should be like, it's okay if it breaks because you're still learning and experimenting while you're building this.
No, they're not going to allow that. They're real because they've been deployed. They've been working like this for years.
Yeah.
So, it's just just you have to find a balance. But I'll figure it out. I think I have a pretty good overview of where I want them to land in future state. But I have to work out some kinks in
code repository and test something. Something, please. Please, something. A test folder. One test, please. A unit test. Maybe an integration test. That'd be nice.
Yeah.
But
the one
code repository and a unit test and an integration test. I just want 3 things. Just 3 things, please.
I think my final comment, Kit, is I want to see you come back in 6 months, and I want you to give a talk on how this is working out. This sounds like a really good topic to hear more about.
Yeah, well, it's already, very extremely challenging. I've already thought about, this ain't worth it. I've had those
Sure.
thoughts to myself because it's like you want the impossible. You have, so anyway, I'm curious to see.
There's a lot to unpack with this. Phil,
Yeah.
I saw you being kind and raising your hand. Did you want to say something, man?
Yeah, hey, the only thing that occurs to me is like a lot of the feedback that I'm hearing to was like get the developers to do a ton of stuff differently. And I think that's not wrong, but it's like what are the goals here? Like if there's something that you can do that's like you can get them further along without requiring a ton of upfront work, like maybe that's a better MVP than like, well, I can do this thing, but everyone else has to jump through hoops with me. Like if you can have that like initial step that's like easy for the rest of the team, that might get you some goodwill with either the customer or the teams involved, to kind of lead them by the nose later on.
Yeah,
I'm sure that's something you've considered already, but maybe like security I'm not familiar with Salesforce, but if you can do any kind of security scanning for them that doesn't require the developers to change their practice, they're not using a code repo, they're not doing X, they're not doing Y, they're not doing Z, but you got this, and maybe that helps them make a little bit more of a secure product or something.
I think that's the approach. And I was thinking the same thing, like something not a heavy lift that I can have them install and then work them through make it better iteratively, something easy.
Here's another question. Ask them this question. How do they share code right now? How do they share code between of them? How many people are there? 2, 3, 4, 5, 6.
About 10 developers.
All right, 10 developers. How do they share code back and forth? It's easier to put it in a repo, GitHub. I don't care what it is.
I know that. I absolutely know that. Let me tell you how antiquated they are. You know how they do the peer reviews? They just email each other. Yeah. So it's
code repository first, please.
Yeah, and they have Azure repo, which is basically Git. So
okay, they have GitHub?
No, they have I think Azure repo is
repo, that's fine. Some repo.
Yeah, but none of this they're using, but that's what they use. They have the whole suite of Azure, the pipelines, the
Azure DevOps.
Yes, that's what they're using. I'm more familiar with Jenkins as a continuous integration, but I'm just going to have them use what they have because it's less work.
That's the easiest way.
Like turn on what you have. Let's just turn this on and see what happens.
Yeah, this is definitely more than just a tech. This is definitely a people challenge too. I think it's a fascinating challenge.
Yeah, it is. I mean, it's more to it too. You would crack up, but yeah, it is actually, to be honest with you, it is over my head. Like I'm punching up with all of the environmental challenges, the timeline, the different people, and the power plays, and just the lack of it's hardest with people who don't know that they don't know. Right?
It's a challenge, and like being honest, like I'm not going to speak for the rest of the room, but I'm definitely always we're all making stuff up as we go along. For being honest.
That's the only way you can get better, right? You take on challenges and try to, you challenge yourself, you learn something new. But this is a doozy.
It'd be a good one for the books.
Yeah.
So as an example, I left a job because they didn't have a repo. I left a company because they didn't have a repo. The IDE had the code. They shared their IDE that way.
Yeah. I was
losing my mind when I was there.
I had to give them an example. I mean, listen, it's crazy. It is really amazing. It's a good, it's a good, party story starting, but it's not good to live in it. I'm sure when I get further down the line, I'll look at it with a chuckle. But right now, I'm just looking at it like, oh my God, what did I do? Well, thank you all for your advice. I took up the whole meeting, and I'm so sorry.
You didn't take
I
up the whole meeting.
apologize.
This is
Kit,
this
it
is
was
what we're all
fun.
here for, Kit. This is great. But we
It
are
was really
getting kind of
fun.
up there. And we're getting close to the official close. I'll go ahead and open the floor to any more thoughts or comments on this whole experience. I'll take a quick mention to anybody who's been watching this. Thank you for spending the time and looking at this video. We hope it was a good use of your time. I'm going to go ahead and cut the recording as soon as this thing makes itself available.